Recording in progress.
There you go. All yours.
American program. Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming along. I had to drag family and friends, of course, and bribe them with drinks and dinner and whatever. But
Is that why you left early?
yes, we had a salubrious dinner at what's it called? Guzman and Gomez. Mexican place on the corner of Warragul and Waverley Roads. It was very convenient. Anyway, hello there in internet land. How many have we got on?
That's 10.
Is that all? That's it. All right. Well, I'm glad that 10 of you are with us. Okay. So welcome to this presentation. I'm sitting down because of the Zoom thing. I hope you'll find this interesting and maybe even entertaining. My original intention for tonight was to do a standard 60 plus page display of Australian parcel post, the ugly ducklings of postal history, for which I, as an affirmed ugly duckling, have a special affinity. However, when our ebullient president, who I've also known since he was a schoolboy, and we actually went to the same school, I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, he used to rock up to my office in his Ivanhoe grammar uniform with his school bag.
If I had a bag of cash, then I wouldn't give you
I've always thought there should be more Gary Diffins around. The hobby would be a better thing, and the world would be a better place. There you go. Yes, it would. Despite everything. So anyway, Gary asked me to give an illustrated talk about the hopelessly broad subject of collecting postal history, and I happily, foolishly agreed. The task is akin to compressing the wisdom of the ages into one sentence, which, by the way, has been done. To wit, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Okay, now, just press that.
Right.
Right? Do I have to point it up there?
No, just press
Well,
right.
it's not doing anything. Flipping.
It's worked before.
It did, didn't it?
Press it down.
Yeah. No. Right. It was working fine before.
It was.
Until I picked it up.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. So I'll use the mouse, will I? No, there we go.
Okay. You just want pressing it.
Maybe that's what it was. I'm a delicate little flower.
We know that.
Okay. I'm regularly told by members of the Royal, including Gary, that they enjoy reading my column in Philately from Australia. And this is one of the pages from a recent article. Even some avowed non-postal historians seem to gain something from my quarterly tall tales and true, which of course is very gratifying feedback for any writer. So to provide a sense of continuity and context, I'll speak to the title of the journal column, A Few of My Favourite Things. Our guests might enjoy a review of the 20 columns published so far, but that might be a bit underwhelming for those who have already read them and join me on remarkable journeys looking for missing Polish aviators, scouring deepest, darkest Africa, and steaming to Nauru in the middle of a war. Instead, tonight, my goal is to provide everyone with an overview of my subject as an introduction to collecting postal history, which, for those who haven't heard the term before, may be summed up as telling the stories of how letters have traditionally been sent from point A to point B, how much it cost, what might have interrupted their journeys, and how they got there. For those with inquiring minds, postal history might also be expressed in terms of how, when, where, what, and why. I began collecting stamps when I was only 4 years old. It was the perfect hobby for a sickly kid who missed a lot of school because of illness. Naturally, my early collecting was naive and uninspired, and there are some who think I haven't advanced very far. For years, all my stamps were in one album, and I kept a running tally of how many I had. And I see some people nodding, because the fact is that regardless of how far we have come in our philatelic journey, virtually all of us started in much the same way. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. There we go. In my case, when I was 10, I discovered postmarks, specifically the dated hand stamps applied at all the different post offices in Victoria and beyond. That set me on a path I'm still following avidly 6 decades later. And along the way, I also formed collections of the stamps of Rhodesia, Ceylon during World War II, aerograms of the Arabian Gulf, and postal stationery of Victoria. Explanation: Rhodesia is now divided into Zimbabwe and Zambia. Sri Lanka is the modern name of Ceylon, and aerograms are lightweight forms that are sent by air at discounted rates, and they are but one form of postal stationery. 20 years ago, I started developing a simple collection of Australian mail to overseas countries. Today, it encompasses all postal history elements of destination mail from Federation on the 1st of January 1901 until the introduction of our new currency on the 14th of February 1966. And I'm sure that date was chosen because they knew that we would love the decimal system. As I've already indicated, postal history is more than just postage stamps on envelopes. It is actually the story of written communication before technology made letters effectively redundant, which you all may have noticed. Before email, before the internet, before texting, before the fax machine, people, companies, and officials, they're not really people, wrote letters, millions of them, and the post office was the enabler of the entire system. My collecting period is from the Boer War to the Cold War, from when most vehicles were foot-powered or drawn by horses to land speed records being set on Lake Eyre in rocket-powered cars, from no aeroplanes to jet passenger aircraft. It's a period encompassing the war to end all wars and a worse conflagration only a generation later, from global empires at their peak to their dismemberment. It's a period encompassing both economic euphoria and utter dismay. It's also a period of very low price inflation. Consider this. The fee to send any postal article, letter, through to parcel, with enhanced security was unchanged from 1891 to 1949, and that fee was only 2 cents. It's simply unfathomable to modern minds. For tonight, I've selected 10 items that speak to various postal history themes. Some of them are recognised as significant rarities, and they are worth a lot of money. Others were acquired for peanuts because the sellers didn't appreciate what they had, and knowledge is power. At the risk of sounding pretentious, I think it's important to tell you how I acquired certain covers, because I'm often asked, where did you find that? Or, I bet that cost you an arm and a leg. Yes, it's a question, because they want to be told yes or no. Wait for this one, Div.
Oh. That.
No.
Oh, I didn't think you did. I know who bought it.
Because of their own childhood experiences, many people think stamps are for kids and they have no awareness of postal history. If I share what major items have actually cost, it definitely changes perceptions and reinforces the fact that this is a serious pursuit. Although I really stress, that you can collect well on even a very modest budget. And in fact, most items I have acquired have cost less than a good meal. Tonight, you will see that great pieces don't need to break the bank. It's important to understand that the cost of a cover often has little to do with its intrinsic interest as a piece of real history. Now, before I get into the display, did I hear a groan? Here are a few random facts that will help you cut through the jargon, you newbies. Every item tonight features the ancient, complex, inefficient currency we inherited from Great Britain. The main unit of currency was the pound, not a pound weight, but a pound sterling. A pound was divided into 20 shillings. Each shilling was the sum of 12 pennies or pence. So there were 240 pennies in a pound. And in 1966, £1 magically became $2. Today, it costs $1.50, previously 15 shillings, to post a domestic letter. From the beginning of tonight's journey, you could send the same letter for a penny or 1 cent, or to England for 2 cents. By the end of the period, 65 years later, the internal fee was 5p or 4 cents, and surface or sea mail to any overseas destination was 8p or 7 cents. Even airmail cost no more than 2 and 6p or 25 cents. Our system of weights and measures, also a gift from the British, was even more complex. Fortunately for tonight's purposes, you need only to remember that 1 ounce equals 33 grams and half an ounce equals half of that. I do hope you enjoyed tonight's presentation. Now, you're welcome to make comment or ask questions as we go, but if we run over time, it's your fault. Okay, let's get straight into it with one of my recent acquisitions. Oh, thought that might work. Yeah. The subject here is a World War II cover from Sydney to Shropshire in England with an exceptional franking, which means the stamps that are on it, including £1 grey and £2 black and carmine, kangaroo and map stamps. The total postage is £3, 4 shillings and 5p, which today converts to $3.44. Now, that doesn't sound like much, does it? In fact, this is one of only 2 envelopes recorded with the highest denomination, the £2, and the only one with the top 2 values. The cover was posted in November 1940, by which time Italy had entered the war, which caused air routes across the Mediterranean to be suspended. The least worst option was what was called the horseshoe route. And as you can see, it wasn't very direct. So if you follow the line from Australia through to Cairo, and then imagine a line going from Cairo up to Southampton, that's the way things went until the 10th of June 1940, when Italy decided to butt in. And after that point, the plane turned left and flew down to Durban in South Africa, from where the mails were then taken all the way to England by boat, with all the dangers that that entailed. So the route utilised the Qantas and Imperial Airways routes, and instead of a week, as was usual in 1939, this trip could take up to 2 months, for which the cost was 1 and 6p or 15 cents. And it also wasn't guaranteed that the mail would be flown to Durban and then taken by ship. It just depended on loading capacity and things like that. But there was a quicker option across the Pacific Ocean. Now, for some reason, I haven't done a map for this one. This utilised the flying boats of Pan Am Airways. It halved the transit time, but cost nearly 4 times as much. This exceptional cover, bring back, featured in the most recent sale at Abacus Auctions, which you all may have heard of, twice before. Twice I had been the underbidder at $20,000 plus. Thank you very much, Richard. I've been his underbidder twice. Hey? So anyway, I couldn't resist the temptation when it was available for $18,000. Ouch. Well, I'd rather that be the underbidder a third time, I can tell you. In case you're interested, the flap on the back of the envelope tells us that the sender was Abel Lemon and Co., a food and dry goods wholesaler founded in Adelaide in 1887 and still trading today. Although I'd never heard of them. Anybody ever heard of them? No. You have? Oh, good. Good. Okay. let's move on to subject number 2. At the other end of the spectrum are items that have cost next to nothing, but are just as interesting. This item has no stamps, but it bears a paid at Melbourne marking in red, indicating that postage was paid in cash. Now, virtually 100% of such postmarks are found on domestic mail, and any overseas usage is very scarce. This is a linen parcel tag that was affixed to a package with string passed through the eyelet. It must have been an important parcel because it was sent by air, by the same expensive Trans-Pacific route as our first cover. I bought it for a few dollars for the Melbourne date stamp. A common marking in uncommon circumstances, which my readers will know is a collecting mantra of mine. But wait, there's more. It was only years later that I noticed the endorsed postage of £94, 10 shillings and threepence. By far the highest amount known to have been paid to post any Australian pre-decimal postal article. And there's no doubt about it because it's written on both sides. Now think about that. My first cover had one £2 kangaroo on it. And that cost me how much? This item was sent by H.V. Mackay, makers of the famous Sunbeam Harvester, or Sunshine Harvester, rather. I've written Sunbeam, I can't believe that, since I used to work in Sunshine. If they had used stamps on this parcel, they would have required 47 of the £2, plus small change. So it's a truly extraordinary item. Doesn't look like much, but I love it. Okay, next up. Yes, John.
The Sunday, is that the value of the parcel? Or is it the postage?
That was the postage.
How do you know?
It's a good question. Because it's written right beside the paid date stamp. Yes, and it does rate out at 5 and 10 pence times whatever it is. It's a lot. And the threepence on the end was that registration fee that I mentioned earlier. And they were sending it to the Director of Ordnance Products at the Butterley Iron Works. So it was obviously some sort of machinery. And there's the registration label to prove our threepence. So, yeah, it's a remarkable thing. But that's a very good question. I had not considered that it might refer to anything other than the postage. But considering it has a pound sign in front of it, it's certainly not a reference to its weight. And I'm sticking with my story because I think it's 100% right. Okay, next up is this boring picture postcard sent from Ballarat to the French colony of Gabon, as it's expressed there in Equatorial Africa, which is a truly exotic destination. Now, this turned up in one of my, which iteration was it? A prestige auction at Baronia. And I was calling the auction and there was no interest in this item at $90. So I made a reflex decision to buy it, commenting right then that I couldn't believe there were no other takers. The date was the 20th of November 2004. This one item inspired a collection that is now right on 20 years old. Initially, I just wanted one attractive social or commercial item to every country and territory on the planet. That goal has still not been achieved, and I can assure you it's not for lack of trying. I'm yet to find any sort of postal article to numerous places, including such large territories as Mongolia, Chad, and French Guiana. If anybody can help with any of these, 1901 to 1965, I'm in. And this card is still the only piece that I've even recorded to Gabon. Never seen another one. I would love to upgrade it. By the way, Gabon's in the middle. Can you see it? Up there. How do I get it to point?
On the top there.
There, that thing. No.
Yeah, give it here.
Give it here.
It's that one.
Yeah. I just got it. There you
There
go.
we go. Gabon. So yeah, this card's still the only piece I've found to Gabon. I would love to upgrade it. The stamp is on the wrong side. It's underpaid, but wasn't taxed. There's no message, and the postmarks are lightly struck.
I'll tell you.
In other words, it's a gem. Okay. Move on to patient number 4. 2 decades ago, two decades on, some things haven't changed. Distant.
You own that.
Oh, you've owned a couple of them and haven't noticed.
I knew what that was.
Yeah, there you go. 2 decades on, some things haven't changed. Destination mail has become hot for some countries and regions. Competition often forces Gary Diffin to pay through the nose for his 19th century covers from the Australian colonies. However, for Commonwealth of Australia, pre-decimal destinations, I am often the only bidder. This item, we're staying in colonial Africa. The postcard here is addressed to Landana, Chiloango, Angola, Congo, Portuguese Africa. But it's only sort of to Angola. At Luanda, the Angolan capital, a postal clerk added the word Cabinda. And there is an octagonal Correio Portuguese Cabinda arrival date stamp. How's my pronunciation, Lynn? My sister lived in Portugal for a while. Okay, so are you still lost? Here we go with Cabinda. That's this bit. And for something that big, you would think, should have heard of that. Anyway, it's not surprising that you haven't, because it's not a country. Cabinda is an exclave, not an enclave, an exclave of Angola, which is down here. So it's not that far away, but it's completely separated. And it's located wholly within what were then French Congo and Belgian Congo, apart from the coastal region on the Atlantic Ocean. In keeping with the obvious rarity and knowing that the vendor would kick up a fuss if I didn't do this, I gave it a fulsome description, estimated at $500, had no competition, and snapped it up at the reserve of $380. Crazy stuff, mate.
I know.
Absolutely crazy.
He was the vendor.
He was yeah.
I'd stopped collecting that stuff.
Good.
Good.
And I thought, oh, geez.
I should have been challenged for this next item. It came up at another firm. This is one of those.
Lucky I didn't see it.
This is one of those aerogram things. So it's got a letter written inside it, which is one of the reasons I really like aerograms, letter cards, and postal cards, because you get the letters that are part of the deal. This came up at another firm, and from the tiny catalogue photo, I thought the stamp was a King George V penny green and nearly dismissed it as a philatelic confection. Fortunately, something moved me to check the description. This marvellous item is addressed, as you can see, to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, also known as the roof of the world. Because Tibet never joined the Universal Postal Union, and it's now been absorbed into China, the Australian 10pence, or 9 cents, paid postage only to the border. At the frontier town of Gyansi, the primitive Tibetan stamp was added to pay the internal postage. So there's Lhasa, there's Gyansi, and the road in is through this little part of India called Sikkim, which is between Nepal and Bhutan. And that was the only way that mail was going into Tibet at that time. In fact, that had been the case for many years. So the full letter within is an invitation from an Australian woman to exchange stamps. Yes, that was a thing. The estimate was a mere $250. The hammer price, a mere 190. The lesson, hey?
You're lucky I didn't see it.
The lesson here is to at least skim an entire catalogue or a dealer's box because you never know where gems may be hidden. Our leading aerogram collectors all missed it. Okay, so patient number 6. Of course, if the seller knows he has a really good item, there's little chance of it hiding in an unexpected nook or cranny. When the term pioneer airmails of Australia is used, it's usually expected that relevant items will be flown domestically or between here and England. However, in 1926, Group Captain Richard Williams of the fledgling Royal Australian Air Force piloted on his own a rickety seaplane from Point Cook outside Melbourne all the way to Cape York, then on to Thursday Island, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. He was supposed to continue his intrepid Pacific survey flight to the New Hebrides and New Caledonia, but unfortunately his old kite packed it in at Tulagi in the Solomons. Most of the surviving 15 or so commemorative covers, and they come in blue or black, the blue ones are pretty, are to or from New Guinea or Papua. Now, my example is addressed to New Caledonia, which you can see is right there. So the route went up the east coast, across the Torres Strait to Port Moresby. Then because it was a seaplane, it went around here rather than over the Owen Standley Ranges, up to Rabaul, and then down to Tulagi, which is somewhere in here. Whoops, oh dear, that wasn't clever. Okay, and then he was supposed to come down here, but the plane wasn't up to it. So it didn't get to Noumea. I was going to say it was addressed to the Vacuum Oil Company, which some of you may have heard of. It later became Mobil, and it was addressed to their office in Noumea. Didn't get there, but it did make it to Tulagi and back. This gem was in the Tom Frommer collection that we sold in 2017 for $15,600. Not the whole collection, just this one cover. It turned up last year in Switzerland with an annoyingly solid estimate, or reserve rather, of 7,500 Swiss francs. Fortunately, in a sense, I was the only bidder. By now, you all think I'm quite deranged. Why would I pay these sums for things that nobody else wants? Why wouldn't I wait until they were re-offered at lower prices? Well, I've tried that in the past, only to find myself in a battle, with the final figure being more than the original estimate. So I usually strike while the iron is hot. The priority is securing the prize, not the price. As it happens, accepting the Williams cover, I believe that all tonight's subjects were between inexpensive and cheap. Okay, so giving you a sneak preview of this ugly thing. Until 1912, the 6 Australian states issued their own adhesive postage stamps. However, postal stationery with this ugly portrait stamp of the new King George V and inscribed Australia was issued in 1911. Therefore, every uprated example produced what we call a state-Commonwealth combination franking. With a 2-year window for such usage until the kangaroo stamps were issued in 1913, examples are quite readily available from the larger states, New South Wales and Victoria, larger in terms of population. But when you have the collector's obsessive, compulsive gene, why settle for average? One of my guiding principles, as I think I mentioned earlier, is common items in uncommon circumstances. So here we have a basic twopence halfpenny letter rate item to Germany, a common rate to a common destination. But the letter card is on very flimsy stock, making it a really scarce subtype, and it's used from underpopulated Western Australia. The kicker is the halfpenny or halfpenny stamp. It's a production error, imperforate at the base. So you can see that there's no teeth here. There are teeth down here, but they're from the lower pane. So this line of perforation was omitted. There's only a handful of examples recorded, at least one of which has actually had those lower perfs trimmed off, which is really stupid, of which this is the only one on cover. And I did have competition for this lovely piece. The estimate was $4,000, but the hammer came down in my favour at 5.25. On the subject of unusual items to demonstrate common rates, the next item is a postcard to Samoa. It's actually a most unusual stationery card with the penny red kangaroo printed very low so as not to intrude on the company's fancy imprint. The card needed to be uprated for the foreign rate because prior to World War I, Western Samoa was under German administration. So where better to affix the halfpenny stamp but impinging on the corporate imprint, exactly where the printer carefully didn't apply the penny. Patterson, Lang and Bruce were clothing importers and wholesalers. The message on the reverse is an advice that the firm's travelling representative, a guy called J.A.G. Dalpouget, would drop into Krause und Royce in Appia about 2 months after the card was mailed. It wasn't a case of, I'll be in the area tomorrow, I'll pop in. 2 months. Born in France, the representative, Dalpouget, represented various firms in the Pacific Islands. One of his daughters was named Blanche, after whom her niece, this one, was named. Both Blanches were writers, the younger one becoming famous as Prime Minister Bob Hawke's second wife and biographer. And I believe she's still alive. This little tidbit demonstrates how the story of a cover can be developed by fleshing out details about the sender or the addressee. When you start looking, you have no idea where the trail may lead. It's a bit like following Alice down the White Rabbit's hole. To me, this is one of the real joys of collecting postal history. And if it's a backstory you want, it's a backstory you'll get. This next item more than adequately fits the bill. This Western Australian tuppence envelope began its life at the small gold mining town of Mount Malcolm, 850 kilometres northeast of Perth, with a halfpenny added for the foreign letter rate. Have you ever stopped to think how big Western Australia is? I mean, it's massive. You can't go within Victoria, not even from Cape Hicks to Mildura. It's nowhere near 850 kilometres. A lot less. Anyway, a halfpenny was added for the foreign letter rate, and the address is remarkable. It's to Mr. H. Klink, leader of the Ramu Expedition 3, Stephansort, German New Guinea. There's those Germans again. They're all over the Pacific before the war. The Ramu River that runs through the remote northwest portion of German-occupied New Guinea was discovered in 1886. There were several expeditions to the area, each of which penetrated a little further into the wild interior. On this occasion, Herr Klink, who later was camp commandant of Hogan's Heroes.
I was wondering where this would go.
He could not be traced. And the cover was redirected to Sydney. Among the several back stamps is a fine strike of the rare Deutsche Seapost, there, Neuguinea, Zweigleini, Singapore, which is the only example I've noted on any cover from Australia. That's because that line didn't go between Singapore and Australia. It went between Singapore and the islands and then up to China. I said earlier that one should acquire excellent items at the earliest opportunity. With regard to this cover, which is one of the great Commonwealth of Australia destination items, I actually ignored my own advice more than once. When it first came to me for auction in 2014, the vendor insisted on an estimate of $12,000. I wasn't the only one who balked at the price, and it was unsold. The following year, it was resubmitted at $8,000. Far more reasonable, but at the time for me hard to justify. And again, it was unsold. Fast forward a few months, and $5,000 was the new estimate. And by this time, I felt the currency had been debased, and I again, and everybody else, let it go. Later, the vendor decided he just needed to sell the damn thing, and he offered it to me for $3,500 net, which I accepted. The lesson here is quite clear. If the first offering had been at $4,000 or even $5,000, I'm confident it would have sold above the higher figure. And we constantly need to remind vendors that their gems are worth only what someone else is prepared to pay for them. If you recoup your cost, that's actually a very good result. If you turn even a small profit, that's a great outcome. Do not buy stamps and covers for investment.
Yeah, but he's a dealer. And I know who it is.
Yes, and did he make money on that?
No.
No, he did not. Okay, patient number 10. So from one of my earliest items, that was 1902, to one of the latest. My effective finishing date is the 13th of February 1966, the last day of the infernal imperial pound, shillings and pence monetary system. There was a little ditty, bring in the dollars, bring in the cents, on the 14th of February 1966. It wasn't just a slick marketing jingle, it was an anthem. And there's Dollar Bill himself. No more 12 pennies to a shilling or bob. No more 20 shillings to a pound or quid or 21 to a guinea. It was truly liberating for the entire economy, especially so for a 10-year-old schoolboy yet to be diagnosed with mild autism and dyslexia. So it's ironic that one of my favourite postal history byways is dual currency frankings. Pre-decimal stamps remained valid until the 13th of February 1968, so 2 years. Businesses and families had that period to use up whatever old stamps they had, after which the pre-decimal issues were demonetised, something that the post office has tried to do with stamps in more recent times. But that's another story. So this registered cover was posted on the 29th of July 1966 and sent by air to Austria, for which the Zone 5 airmail rate was 25 cents, previously 2 and 6pence, and the registration fee, which had soared by this time from threepence to 2 shillings, was now 20 cents, for a total of 45 cents. As Alexander Meerkat says, simple. But here's the tricky bit. Converting pennies and shillings to cents required shoehorning 12 pennies into 10 cents. 10 shillings or 120 pence thus became 100 cents or $1. Postage paid here was 3 shillings and 11 pence. 2 and 5 and 1 and 6 is 3 and 11. Plus 6 cents. 3 shillings equals 30 cents. 11 pence equals 9 cents, trust me. That equals 39 cents plus the 6 cents, and we have our 45 cents. Yay! Especially in Europe and America, you can occasionally find dual currency covers in dealers' counter boxes for a few dollars. This one actually came from an interstate postal auction and was an absolute gift at $60. It should be worth at least 10 times that figure. One day, maybe when we're old and grey. As a memento of the evening, please take home a reminder of the currency that we oldies had to deal with on a day-to-day basis. I have printouts here. I was of an age where it didn't have a huge daily impact. However, the conversion marked my first experience of being stitched up by the powers that be. Instead of 12 lollies for a shilling, I now received only 10 lollies for the same amount. It still rankles. Okay. So collecting can be as wide or as restricted as you want it to be. Only a lunatic would take on something as expansive as Commonwealth of Australia Destination Mail 1901 to 1966, guilty as charged. There's really no limit to the subjects that a new player could enjoy. Choose a country that is currently unpopular, there's plenty of them, or that nobody has ever been serious about, and there's plenty of those too in the more modern period in particular. You can limit your time frame. You can put a topical spin on your collecting, collect a subject rather than a country or geographical area. You can collect something really niche, such as instructional markings on postal stationery, or the postal history of a small town, or of a prominent family. But be careful, there's a person in the room who collects the postal history of a small island, and he tells me he's up to 30 volumes of material just for. World War One. Thank you, Brian. World War One and World War Two are are huge canvases in their own right. From a postal history standpoint, they are outstanding collecting fields, but they are daunting subjects. It need not be the case. You could focus on mails between prisoner of war camps, naval mail, service suspended markings, date stamps of the forces in the Pacific, censorship, military or civilian, undercover addresses. The list is endless. Come at things from a different angle. Focus on usage of a particular stamp issue or group of issues. Limit yourself to express services. Work up a humorous collection such as, whoops, did I already have that up? Such as weird place names. My favourite is You Potty Pot Pot. Or spelling errors on date stamps. You'd be surprised how many there are. Or pretty much whatever floats your boat. You could collect mail to movie stars or politicians, or you could chase down covers that make no sense and be the first person to make sense of them. Collecting options are limited only by your imagination. You could start out simply by acquiring a few items you like the look of, or you could purchase an established collection or a stillborn collection and take it in a new direction. Every object has a story, and that's certainly true in philately. Mint stamps have their own stories, but they are of design, production, aesthetics, provenance, and gum. Used stamps hint at bigger stories. At least they have served the purpose for which they were issued. The real tall tales and true are found in entire postage articles, especially those accompanied by the original contents. Learning how to read a cover is key to unlocking its mysteries. Who'd like to have a go at this one? What do all the various markings mean? Where were they applied? And why? What caused an unexplained delay in getting a cover to its intended recipient? Or how did it manage to arrive in seemingly record time? The serious cover collector is part philatelist, part historian, part researcher, part detective, part critical thinker, and ultimately part storyteller. He or she is also a custodian of artefacts from our social, political, and economic history. For centuries, the post office was a critical, fundamental, foundational element of human society, and it doesn't live in the cloud or on a device. It lives in our sorting boxes and on our display pages. I would like to acknowledge and thank the marvellous online resource that is Wikipedia for all the maps shown tonight free of charge. And I'd like to say also that at Abacus we financially support Wikipedia, and I would urge everyone who uses their sites to make small regular donations to keep them afloat. I'd also like to thank Ananya. Where's Ananya gone? Ananya's up the end there, next to Georgia. Ananya did all the scans for us for tonight, and Frank here helped put them into the PowerPoint presentation. I think Ananya did all that too, but I'll say Frank had something.
I gave you the front page.
And you gave, and she gave you the USB.
Yeah.
Yep, there you
That
go.
was my own USB.
You gave her the USB.
We don't
So,
have USB
I-
with Abacus. Why not?
I know you had something to do with all this. To the rest of you, many thanks for your attendance and attention. I hope I've stimulated or enhanced your interest in our shared history. Finally, I'm happy to take any questions you might have about the presentation or the rather random frames that are on the wall behind the divider there, which I brought along just to show you that there's other things that I'm interested in. Some of them are one frame exhibits, a couple of them are the first frame from larger exhibits, and a couple of them are just random pages. And for anybody who might be looking for something to start out on, the aerograms are available, and so is the salon. So you can talk to me about either of those afterwards. That's it. Thank you. What are you doing?
Yeah. Someone's entered a bit late when you finished.
All right.
Right.
I'm going to swap seats.
We're swapping seats again. Here we go.
Before I get back to the Zoom, I'd like to thank Gary for his presentation. And normally at this point in junction, we have a plaquette.
No plaquette.
No, because we don't have our secretary. So we're going to have to arrange for a plaquette. We'll organise one to come to you. But thanks a lot. I mean, for me, and I'll sit down in front of the Zoom. You're preaching to the converted in me. I collect the earlier stuff from here, so we actually don't clash in the auction room. Thank God, because we're both pig-headed.
Unless it's a Melbourne.
Yeah.
Occasionally.
Yeah.
But generally we don't clash. But the thing is, it's a follow-on from the history, because at the moment what we do, and everybody in this room, you take your communication for granted. Everybody in this room has a computer or a laptop, and you're able to email anybody around the world. You're able to get to someone and talk to someone within seconds. You do this on your mobile phone. You can talk to and communicate with anybody within seconds. You go back 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, couldn't do that. How you communicated to the other side of the world would take you a month and a half. And if it's a round trip, that's 3 months. And if you go to the stuff that I collect, it used to be a year and a half. So if you look at how we live our lives and the progression that our lives have taken, this is just a snapshot of your social history, economic history, and how we communicated with the rest of the world. So for me, it's a great thing to be able to see mail items going to destinations. You think, who was writing there? And I often wonder that. So Gary, thanks again. I'm looking forward to going to look at the stuff on the walls. Unfortunately, our people in Zoom land are unable to do that. We'll just need to go through the rest of the meeting. And for this month, we haven't got...
Do you want to press stop record?
Where is this? Where's the stop record?
Up. Yeah.
Where?
No, not pause. Go up. Where
To the right, where it says more.
more?
What? More.
I'm glad I'm not the only one who's a techno.
Why don't you press it?
Yeah,
More.
press it there.
Stop record.
Come down to your right, down there.